become richer and richer. The workers won't. They will still be on £5 an hour. And in fact, what tends to happen in capitalism is because I'm always looking to increase my profit to stay competitive, I look at squishing down every cost. And if I'm the only factory in town, I can pay them £5 in year one, but in year two I might well pay them £4.50, because it's like, well, look, you either go unemployed or you work for me for £4.50. There ain't nothing else around. And a more cynical view is obviously there are cartels and things to keep the prices down. But it tends to happen naturally anyway, as a natural product of maximising profit. You look at your fixed costs, and a fixed cost is labour, and if you can squish that down, obviously, then you do. So, in terms of libertarianism, I mean that's a pretty major sticking point, because libertarians, including the anarcho-capitalist Murray Rothbard, state that each person justly owns whatever previously unowned resources he appropriates or mixes his labour with. So in other words, it goes back to what you were saying in ethics, in the introduction to ethics, about property rights, where if I pull a branch of a tree and carve it into a bowl, a wooden bowl, although the tree might not be owned by anybody, the bowl is owned by me because I've carved it with my own fair hands and I've mixed my labour with it. Now, a very unjust rebuttal to this, which might be a case put forward by me as factory owner, would be to say that although the labour was mixed with the raw materials, I owned the raw materials, so therefore, despite the fact that the workers worked on them, they still had no property rights over them. And incidentally, it's an interesting thing, isn't it? I mean, if slavery is buying and selling a person, giving someone a wage, hiring someone, literally, I mean, hiring and firing is hiring is renting. So really, what's the difference between renting a person and buying a person, apart from the longevity of the contract? I mean, it's completely anathema to human dignity, surely. It's nuts. So it's an indignity to human nature, and more importantly, it doesn't really resolve this business of property rights, because it creates inequality. So a just solution, instead of having owners and workers, in other words, capitalists and hired meat bags that will do your bidding, it's quite conceivable to have worker collectives, to have worker-owned factories, and these are well documented. Again, I mean, I'm sure as an anarcho-capitalist you have had these views put to you before, and of course, if you look at the definitions of anarcho-libertarianism, for example, so, there is a bifurcation there, but there is a sort of social side of it and a capital side of it, and they're born out in sort of different rationales from essentially the same non-statist premise. So it is important to sort of go this one step further, I think. But if you have worker collectives where everybody owns their means of production, and everybody has an stake in the factory, and therefore also has a profit share and gets dividends or whatever from in remuneration, it means that they are effectively, because they're getting a profit share, it's because they own the product that they're making, which is a lot more egalitarian. And if you want to apply any sort of universal theory to anything, it has to involve everybody. You can't set up an underclass and an overclass. If I'm a factory owner, I can give orders to my subordinates, my workers, and they can't do that back. They can't do that back. They can't order me to do stuff. I can sack them. I don't have to do what they say. I'm renting them, so for the period of 9 to 5 or whatever I work, I bloody own them. It's like slavery. It's wage slavery. It's bullshit. It's completely bullshit. It's wrong. Just in the same way as the government is wrong to say that it has a government official has some magical higher ability to be immune from me telling it what to do, but it can tell me what to do and punish me if I don't. It's just the same in anything where that's the case. When someone assumes a power, again, I go back to Chomsky, because he was asked in an interview, is power justifiable in any circumstance? And he said that's not for him to answer, but the burden of proof is on the people that are wielding the power. If they can't prove it empirically and logically, then there isn't a case for it. And there are very, very few cases, he said, where power is arguable in those terms. And the example he gave was that if, going back to said old lady walking across the road, if she hadn't seen that there is a car coming, and I rushed out into the street and grabbed her off the street, forced her off the street so that to save her life from the car that's coming, because she hadn't seen it. That could be argued as one of the few cases where power is empirically and logically viable. You can argue that case, but it's very rare. So in a capitalist system, there is a disparity of power, and that ain't no good, brother. That ain't no good. And also, it gets rid of one of the main criteria that you had for society, which is everything happens on a voluntary basis. If you've got a disparity of power, if you've got people giving orders and people taking orders, then that isn't voluntary, is it? I can't volunteer. If I'm being hired by a factory, I can't volunteer whether or not I take my lunch break at 10 o'clock or 12 o'clock or 2 o'clock. And they're not defined by me. They're not voluntary. I don't. You could argue that I voluntarily went into the contract and I wasn't forced to work for them. You can argue that, but again, I mean, at a very simplistic level, if you say that there's only one factory in your town and everybody works there, and it's that or be unemployed, then how much choice do you really have? If the choice is that or be unemployed, if you're a low-skilled worker, the job market anyway, even if there are a million factories for you to choose from, if you're a low-skilled worker, you can only get work at a peon level, which is different from me saying that I don't agree with the free market. If you're defining free market as something which is non-state controlled, then brilliant. Interestingly, there's this chap, and you can see that particularly. He's a chap called Soros, and he is an economist and a very successful capitalist in his own right. I mean, he made himself squillions of quid and has done lots of philanthropical work, but he also proffers some philosophical and economic notions about the fallibility of leaving everything to the free market, but that's another day. That's something else, which we'll get into another point. I said I was going to do 3 points. I'm not now, because I realised that this podcast particularly has gone on for some time, and we can get into it at another time. It's not a massive issue. It's very difficult to be concise with philosophical points, because you need to look at them logically and run through the process. So I appreciate this is run on. But that's it for now. I mean, that'll do, I'm sure, to get the juices flowing. We'll talk about the other thing later, which is really juicy. I know you'll love it, because it's talking about it's coming up with a counter theory to the notion that there is no such thing as a scientific religion, which I know you'll love getting your teeth into, as will I, I'm sure. So we'll leave that for another day. But just to sort of put those out to you, and I want primarily to get your thoughts on a more sort of social libertarianism. But what I'm talking about is not socialism or communism. I'm talking about the organisation of workforces within a free market. So there's no reason at all why a factory that is run and owned by a cooperative, by a workers' collective, is going to be uncompetitive in a free market, when it's allowed to compete in a free market. And to suggest so is nonsensical. But let's establish, first of all, if we're going to have this just society, that it has to be based on egalitarianism. Everybody is the same, because we're all human beings. We establish that empirically to start with, and logically. We're all the same, so we have to have the same rights. We can't have a subclass and a lower class. So that is me. So thank you very much for wading through this, which is probably nudging on 15-20 minutes. So thank you for taking the time to do that, and I will speak to you very soon. Thank you very much.